Rock and roll, spawning in this top right-hand position in the blue, representing the 3D clan and Russia. His name is one of the dopest in all of esports, a combination of two animals you do not want to be caught dead with. It is Couguar.
Facing off against the man in the bottom left, he is a staple of the StarCraft scene, and he's had a bit of a resurgence over the last couple of years. It's going to be the Team Liquid Protoss, MaNa. So Couguar is a cool player for me. Way back in the day, like in HOTS, in like 2014, Couguar was like, I don't know if this was a general consensus among Europe, but like in My Insanity house, Couguar was the guy that we'd hit in online cups sometimes, and we always just considered him like slightly less good Verdi, I guess Rail as he goes by now.
Right.
And like he back in the day, I haven't actually seen him play in a while, but like back in the day, he embodied what all of us think is like Russian Protoss. Because like Russian Protosses are just a little crazier than the rest of European Protosses. They have their own cheeky builds. They tend to be very aggressive. I mean, things are a little bit different nowadays, like players like Skillus and obviously Hellraiser from the CIS region. Like, we have more and more standard Russian Protosses, but like back in the day, there was a long period of time where Russian Protosses were the Protosses that did really weird all-ins that you didn't see from anyone else. And Couguar was always one of those players who already got a proxy pylon coming out from him as well. Not really looking like it's not particularly close to MaNa, but I think this might be him sort of leaning into that image where MaNa's going to pop in here and see just a single pylon, and he might be thinking to himself a little bit, okay, gotta be a little safe. Maybe I can't be too greedy.
Modern PvP is so interesting now. We went through that really interesting phase last year, 2 years ago, where roughly every single building was proxied out of the map. It started with Maru playing at the Terran that way, where he proxied all of his buildings, and the Protoss players were like, oh, this is good. So PvP turned into this proxy versus proxy fest for about a year, where every single match was just, you know, what are you going to do? And now I love the meta sort of shifting back to take advantage of the mindset now, where a lot of players will, of course, still proxy their buildings because it's so strong. You get such a boost in your build if your opponent has no idea what you're up against. But then a lot of players also faking these proxies and forcing a lot of probes off the line to do this scouting. And we can see MaNa now very concerned, sending out these stalkers in separate parts of the map. His probe gonna get caught because it's not being escorted by stalkers anywhere. Gonna lose that probe, and now the stalkers are gonna be forced to like converge back eventually to form up so they don't get sniped off one by one. It's a great move that just puts a little bit of the fear of God into your opponent's heart, and I really like it.
I also like how MaNa's reacting, though. He's not super scared. This may also just be that he feels confident enough that even if Couguar is doing something all-in-y, he's going to be fine. I would definitely say that MaNa is the favorite in this series. MaNa is doing very, very well in the last year or two, and he's also just very, very good at PvP just in general.
Right.
So he'll probably be feeling pretty good about this match. Couguar hasn't looked amazing in PvP lately, so MaNa also has had a lot of opportunities to study Couguar's builds from the other 3 Protosses that Cougar's already had to play in this group. So maybe MaNa knows a little bit of Cougar's tricks. He does finally find this pylon, takes that down, and that actually supply blocks Cougar for a little bit. A little bit unfortunate for him.
Jeez. You know, the group distribution has been so interesting in this entire event. It's so funny with the random draws, the way this event works out, because we do see I can't remember which group it is because I don't have them pulled up right now. Maybe you can help me out, Pengy. But one of the groups, I think it's Group D, with not a single Protoss in it, all Terran and Zerg entirely, and then right here in Group C, 5 is it Group C, right? 5 Protoss here in the group. So it really is going to test
4 in Group B as well.
Yeah, and 4 in Group B, and I think 3 in Group A. So all the Protoss shunted into those first 3 groups, and it's really interesting to see the balance here. Some of the players, like MaNa, who are really, really good PvP players, are going to be very happy with this group distribution, and it does keep just a little bit of the luck of the draw alive. Cougar slightly oversaturated right now on his main, as his natural's finished up, but he's still, there we go. I was going to say, dang, that's a very busy main there. The natural going down, goodness gracious. But MaNa's slightly ahead there. The natural's slightly ahead for MaNa, and he'll be able to chrono out a few extra probes. But most importantly, I think, MaNa getting that robo down way before Cougar's able to. So he's going to be able to support this Blink Stalker core with some Immortals possibly a little bit earlier. There's the robo from Cougar now as well. Similar builds from both these guys here, Peggy.
Yeah, you can see the MaNa's just a little bit ahead in everything, though, and I think a lot of that goes back to A, Couguar missing out on a little bit of mining time by sending that probe way out to put that pylon down, and then B, by getting pylon blocked a little bit when that pylon did inevitably go down to MaNa Stalkers. So just a tiny, tiny advantage here for MaNa. Obviously, in PvP, things can swing very, very quickly, so that tiny advantage is not likely to amount to too much, but it is something it's worth keeping in mind. We've got a couple of gateways coming on in for MaNa as he's going to be beefing up his production. He's also looking to take a third base, as is Couguar. So Couguar not quite putting down the extra gateways just yet, opting to focus a little bit more on maybe chronoing out a couple extra probes. And in the meantime, the third base is coming on up, and we're looking like it's going to be a little bit more of a passive early game.
Yeah, very passive here. If we look at the units lost tab, 6 minutes in, 1 probe down on both sides. Not a single army unit has engaged yet in this game. So yeah, very passive game, which I think has got to favor MaNa a little bit. He's one of those players known for his late game play. You know, once he gets past 15-20 minutes, he's terrifying. He doesn't lose focus at all as the game goes longer and longer. And of course, he's very good at reading the tech switches of his opponent and countering effectively. So I'll be excited to see if this game goes a little bit long. But right now, mad props to both. Do people still say mad props, Pengy, or is there a new like young people phrase?
I think boomers like us do.
Okay, I'll do it then. Mad props then to both players for doing a really nice job scouting those hallucinated Phoenix, continually pushing across the map. And both guys have a pretty good beat on the timings and tech so far of their opponent. That infrastructure being read very well.
MaNa already taking a little bit of a supply lead, mostly in the army, purely because he did get those gateways up a little bit quicker. Still maintains the worker lead by 1 as well. And generally, I mean, again, none of this really amounts to too much in the as the game will progress. But MaNa is opening himself up a couple of timing windows if he manages to hit within a few seconds. For example, his +2 is about, I want to say 15-20 seconds ahead, which is always nice to have. At least, you know, you're not going to be hit with any kind of anti-timing if you're in that kind of position. 4 more gateways coming up for MaNa as well, so he's really looking like he's feeling his build order. His build order's gone very, very, very clean. He's going to be able to beef up that army count quite effectively. He's already got a sizable number of stalkers at 12. He's got an immortal out as well. It looks like there's actually 1 more immortal out for Couguar, so that's where he's sort of put his that's what he's sort of focused on, rather than beefing up his production quite as quickly, just going for a little bit more of an immortal count. MaNa still actually not going for more immortals, just gonna have that 1 to sort of anchor the stalker army, while Couguar looking like he'll probably have 3 up by the time MaNa pushes if he decides to go with this warp prism that he's finished up.
Yeah, this is going to be a really interesting fight here from both players. I think it's really going to come down to micro. Obviously, with Blink finished, it gives both players a lot of mobility in their army. And yeah, it looks like MaNa is going to push forward, sniping down that hallucinated Phoenix before it's able to see the exact immortal count for MaNa. And as you said, MaNa going to be counting on the 1 immortal to sort of anchor his army, and then his micro to really make up for the rest of it here. So slightly ahead in army supply, and is going to go ahead and push out. Looks like he's posturing as though he wants to take a 4th behind this as well. So MaNa really staying economically focused, and wow, Couguar going for the 4th also. These guys really, really tight. It's all going to come down to this fight here, Pengy. Does MaNa have enough in his army to make up for the lack of immortals that he's got?
Well, he has +2 as of now, and Couguar doesn't quite yet. It looks like he actually hasn't been chronoing his +2. It looks like it's a little bit further behind than it was before. If MaNa goes for it right now, that may be enough, especially with good blink control. He's got a decent amount of energy on these sentries as well. He's got a little bit more energy on those, so the Guardian Shield could come down. He's got a cancellation on the 4th, and I don't think MaNa's going to look to push too aggressively here. He's just trying to deny the 4th while he gets his own 4th up. And both of the players are actually going in towards Archons now as well. We have a Dark Shrine already on the map for Couguar, so he could look to get a little bit cheeky with that. And he is going to be morphing in a couple of them. Are they aggressive, or are they just for an Archon? It looks like they're... I don't actually see where they are. Oh, it looks like they're moving out, so it looks like they're going to be a little bit aggressive. These force fields coming down, though. That's a pickoff on one of those key immortals for Couguar, and that's very unfortunate for him. MaNa taking a pretty commanding supply lead here.
Yeah, MaNa looking really good. I'm not sure if he knows about these DTs yet, though. He is dropping a photon cannon in his 4th base, but the DT going to hit before this, and now MaNa should hear that swipey sound if he's macroing back home, and he should realize, wait a minute, something's going on. Luckily, he's anchored here. Cannons in the 3rd, cannons in the natural. Cannon, no cannon in the main, actually, so if this DT goes straight up into the main, he might have a chance.
No.
But right now, MaNa in the natural, and he's going to be doing a lot of damage to Couguar. That early immortal pickup is going to pay off.
He takes such an aggressive position here. Couguar unable to hold the high ground, unable to find a favorable concave. And the force field's coming down for MaNa once again, just allowing him to just pick off another immortal, or at least get it very, very low. So far, Couguar's doing a pretty good job holding this. He actually does warp in a couple of DTs. There's still an observer here for Couguar. I don't actually think MaNa has an observer here. So looks like Couguar should be able to hold on. The overcharge on that shield battery as well, going to be pretty good. And despite MaNa getting into a favorable position there, maybe a little bit of an overextension, he does have a couple of observers on the map, but neither of them aggressively positioned. So the DTs doing a great job forcing that army back. MaNa still up in supply, though, and actually a little bit behind in upgrades now. Looks like he didn't start his +3 immediately, was more focused on morphing in units. And Couguar has managed to establish his own 4th up at the 12 o'clock. So MaNa still in a good position, but if he takes another bad fight like that, all of a sudden, Couguar looks like he's in a pretty solid spot. But the 4th base is once again going to be under siege.
This is really interesting. MaNa had a lot going on in that fight, trying to fight on several different fronts, in the main, the natural, and at the third here. Gonna take a one-fronted fight, though, here. And with a War Prism, he should be able to micro his way out of the situation. MaNa has a really nice core of Zealots in the front. They'll be able to tank a lot of that damage and really create some space for his Immortals to do a lot of work. We can see the Immortal count has actually shifted in favor of MaNa now. The big problem I want to point out is back home, while all of that was going on, one of Couguar's DTs slipped into the main base of MaNa and picked off his Robo. So there's actually no Robo left for MaNa here, which means his 3 Immortals on the ground, or pardon me, his 3 Observers in the air and his 2 Immortals on the ground are all that he's going to have out of that Robo until he builds another one. So a nice little pickup on the backside from Couguar. I just don't think it's going to be enough, Pengy. I mean, look at the army supply right now. MaNa with such a beefy army, 7 Archons, tons of charge lots, +2 finished up, +3 going to be not that far behind. He might take a bit of a mismatched fight here if Couguar's +3 finishes, but I think MaNa simply has too much right now. With good army control, this should be the end of the game.
Yeah, there's always a possibility in PvP, especially with disruptor hits like that like maybe MaNa overextends and Couguar is able to pull this back. So I definitely like the way that Couguar is positioning himself defensively here, but MaNa is a very cautious player. He's not one of those hot-headed Protosses that just storms in. He waits for his moment, and he feels like that moment is now. He knows that the disruptor has been on cooldown for a little while. It's about ready to shoot again. He's got a second disruptor coming behind this as well. Does Couguar a decent split there? The Purification Nova does hit a couple of units, and the other Purification Nova comes in, but it's a good blink. Looks like MaNa, though, may have actually overextended a little bit. He loses a lot of those big units, spends a lot of time moving around to dodge those disruptor shots, time that those units are spending not pushing. He does get the warp in, though, at the last second. Couguar's not able to actually focus down that prism, and now with the stalker count, MaNa may at least be able to make this trade a little bit more favorable, but more big units coming in here to Couguar. And as you mentioned as well, Couguar had his +3 for a lot more of that engagement than MaNa did, and MaNa being a little bit over-aggressive. He has had 4 bases behind this the entire time, so he's still in an okay position, but he's lost about 500 more resources as all told throughout the game. And, well, army supply-wise, he has a lot, but it's not really big units. It's Stalkers, it's Zealots, and to be fair, Couguar doesn't have that many big units either, but he's producing double Disruptors, something that MaNa is not producing at the moment.
Yeah, MaNa finally getting that Robo up again in the main base, but that slowed him down considerably. And as you said, that +3 finishing up in the middle of that fight for Couguar was perfect. It reminded me of a proper Protoss versus Protoss. It was like a Rock Shear, where the +3 finished and Couguar started pushing back that energy ball back toward MaNa on the beam. Did anybody in chat get that joke? I don't care. It's fine. +3 finish for both players now. The +1 shield's on the way, and MaNa's going to go for it again here, maybe overestimating his position just a bit, but I think he's still pretty strong. He knows he's had one more base than his opponent. Nice dodge on the Disruptor Ball, by the way, and I think he's just going to try and overpower Couguar here with a straight Gateway army. If you look at the army value, you'll see the gas value of these armies almost the same, despite MaNa being up about 15 army supplies. So the technologically superior army going to be on Couguar's side, but MaNa has a lot of beef in this army as well.
God, I mean, honestly, though, like, this is... Oh, it's a great blink forward there by MaNa. Picks off 2 of the Disruptors, and I was about to talk about how the Disruptors make this pretty favorable for Couguar, but with only 1 Disruptor, that is not the case anymore. And now MaNa is continuing to push forward. He's being able to pick off a lot of these big ticket items. All the Archons down, all of the Disruptors down, and MaNa, it looks like on attempt number 3, third tries the charm, as they say. He's finally going to be able to steamroll over Couguar, despite Couguar making a couple very, very good defenses earlier in the game. It's an unfortunate result there for Couguar, who I feel like probably was feeling pretty good about how this game was going until that last second there. It's a good hit there on that Disruptor, but it's just a little bit too late. And MaNa now up 40 supply, 59 to 17 army, and that's going to be a GG is called. MaNa takes the game. But I think that it's safe to say that was a lot closer than either of us predicted for that game number 1.
A lot closer, and due to a couple really nice plays from Couguar, I think he only worked in 2 Dark Templar that entire game, by the way, but picking off the Robo was so huge, slowing MaNa down. MaNa making a bit of a mistake with his +3, not chronoing it while Couguar did, and that allowed Couguar to take that good that second fight that MaNa lost most of his army in. But yeah, overall, Couguar just playing a pretty darn good game. As you said, though, what really concerns me, Pengy, for Couguar, as we go into game number 2, it's going to be Death Aura, by the way, for game 2. What really concerns me for Couguar is if you look back to the beginning of the game, and the players were doing an almost identical build order, right? Blink into more gates, into Robo. We saw MaNa just a little bit ahead by every metric, right? His forge down a little bit earlier, his worker count slightly ahead, his upgrades seconds ahead. As long as MaNa stays on top of that, I think his superior macro and experience should win him the day. But as we saw, Couguar, plenty of tricks up his sleeve and still a really formidable opponent.
I do have to wonder how much of that was because of that proxy pylon, or that fake proxy pylon that Couguar sent out earlier in the game.
Okay.
I'm honestly just... like I said earlier, I haven't really seen Couguar play that much lately. I don't play Europe anymore because I live in America now, so I haven't played him lately. But I was pleasantly surprised with how good his macro was in that game and how good he was at playing the long game in this PvP. So I don't think it's out of the question for him to take this game number 2, but I definitely favor MaNa, as you said.
Excellent. Well, let's hop into game 2 here and see if MaNa can close this out with a 2-0 or if Couguar can bring us to our second game 3 of the day. All right, spawning in that's bottom right-hand side of Death Aura LE. In French, by the way, this is Aura de Mort. You probably know that. You speak French, don't you, Pengy?
A little bit.
Okay.
I speak un petit peu français.
There you go. And your accent is much better than mine. Anyway, in the bottom right-hand corner of Death Aura LE, it's our Russian Protoss player from the 3D clan. It's Couguar.
Facing off against the red Protoss player in the top left, taking game number 1. It's going to be from Team Liquid. Do you think, like, was there ever a 2D clan?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a really good question.
Maybe like in Brood War they were a 2D clan because it was more of a 2D game.
I was thinking it's maybe it's their fighting games crew.
Oh yeah,
it's the 2D clan because they do all the fighting games in 2D. How's that?
I like that.
Although really, then they'd have to be like
that idea to them. Have them sign us as the managers for 2D clan.
They'd have to be the isometric clan though if they were, because StarCraft isn't like properly 3D, right?
Right. Yeah. That's why I like the fighting games. We'll become fighting game experts. Can't be that hard, right?
Nah,
it's like memorize a bunch of combos.
You mash a bunch of buttons. If you're like me, you learn how to play as Kirby and you just float up into the air and turn into a rock and drop on top of people the entire series. That's all I can do in Super Smash Bros.
I respect it, man.
I'm a nightmare.
I respect it.
No, I'm so bad. I'm so Pengy. There's a reason. So people ask. So just so you know, Pengy, I don't really play StarCraft at all because like I'm so actively bad at video games that it makes me stressed to do anything. So even going to a party where people are like, oh, we're gonna play Smash, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna just get really drunk in the corner because I don't even want to be part of this. Please don't make me.
Right? Since you're already talking about getting drunk in the corner, the real trick is to just get drunk and play StarCraft. And what race do you play?
I play random.
Protoss, right? You play random, okay. So just play Protoss, get really drunk, and then you get the creative juices flowing. Because with Protoss, if you're creative enough, you can win.
True story. The last time I got drunk playing StarCraft, I was doing the campaign on normal, like not even on hard, on normal. And Gemini stopped by my stream because it was some stupid hour of the night, so he was awake in Korea. And Gemini stopped on my stream, and I still have nightmares to this day of him yelling at me, like just making fun of my play mercilessly about how just terrible I am at StarCraft. And he's right. I mean, I was also a little bit drunk, but it was very embarrassing. So I've got some PTSD from that for sure. MaNa opening up with Stargate here. Couguar grabbing his natural quite early and no additional no tier 2 tech yet. Out of MaNa. Oh my god, MaNa's gonna sneak in. Oh, just one adept only gets in though. Man, that was a last second pylon block there. Still very annoying as Couguar has to pull off the line.
Force field burn. Oh man, Couguar looks like he's panicking a little bit, even though he prevented the double adept getting in. MaNa though, the focus fire isn't perfect. He only gets one so far. Oh my god, the amount of mining that's being denied by just a single adept. I thought this was going to be in the clear just because he didn't get the double adept for the one-shots, but still so much damage going down by MaNa here. 5 workers went down to that.
That's incredible, and not for Couguar. Poor guy, 5 workers off 1 adept. That's going to negate the slightly earlier nexus from him. Pardon me, correction. MaNa's nexus is slightly earlier. I don't know what I was looking at earlier. Anyway, MaNa now with a slightly earlier nexus and the Stargate and the Oracle. And oh man, I wonder if Cougar's going to start cutting some corners here because he's lost 5 probes. This is the sort of move where a Protoss player's like, okay, I lost 5 probes, so I can't waste money on a shield battery in my mineral line. I can't put down that cannon that I really want to. And with an Oracle coming in, if those Stalkers are out of position for Cougar, he could be in some real trouble.
Cougar has what he needs to deal with this. It's going to come down to positioning here. Only 2 Stalkers and a Sentry here in the mineral line. They are enough to ward away this Oracle to start. I do think that Cougar had a good read on what was coming here. He's got the main base oversaturated, which to me implies that he identified that, all right, MaNa likes to go for Oracle after going for the double adept push. So he decided, you know what, I'm going to take a tiny bit of an economic loss if he's not doing that in order to be a little bit safer if he is doing that. So I like that play there by Cougar. He loses 1 more worker. I believe. Yes. And, you know, 1 worker, that's fine. I mean, MaNa will be okay with that because he keeps the Oracle alive. Cougar will be okay with that because he didn't lose because he didn't lose too many workers. And from here, we'll just sort of continue on. But MaNa maintains that lead that he had from the initial 5 worker kills. And, well, this makes me wonder what Cougar is going to go for here. Cougar looked very comfortable in the later stages of the PvP, but that was in a game where it was pretty even going forward. And MaNa, as we've said, is a very good late game player. So maybe this does spur Cougar to action. Maybe this does make him feel like, all right, maybe a 2-base play is my best bet here. And we'll see how he decides to play this out. He is getting a Forge, maybe a +1, quick little +1 there is always going to be nice. And behind this, though, MaNa already gone into the Robo. He's already got an Immortal halfway done. Not committing too much to that Stargate. We have seen some players opt for Void Rays there as a follow-up just because they're good units now. But he's not opting for that at all. He's opting to put on a little bit more pressure, though, with these adepts. He gets a Stalker Sentry pick-off, which is going to be pretty nice. Force fields are pretty good, but in come the Oracles.
My god, Adepts in the main base combined with these 2 Oracles doing an awful lot of damage. The Oracle's going 1v1 me, bro, against that Stalker. 1 Stalker does go down. The Oracle's going to get out alive here, and the Adept's still causing some consternation here in the main. Now, this is a bit of, I mean, I don't know about overextension, but MaNa overstaying is welcome just a little bit. Will lose all 3 Adepts there, but trading 3 Adepts for 8 more probes is so 110% worth it right now. Not just because 3 for 8 is a pretty decent trade, but also because he killed the probes earlier. And I find that when I'm in a PvP, if I've already done probe damage, and I'm speaking generally about me, but I assume most people feel this way, if I've already done probe damage, I feel like I'm more liable to stay around and do a little bit more probe damage later to keep that economy artificially down just a little bit more. Like, I'm happy to lose an extra stock or an extra adept maybe to get 1 or 2 more probe kills, because already the percentage-wise, I want to keep their probe count even further down. So MaNa is going to drop his 3rd base. Cougar's going to drop his 3rd as well. +1, a little ahead for Cougar now, and we might go into that very odd PvP area where both players with very similar builds, similar units, just slightly different timings and slightly different proportions of that army, and that always is a fascinating engagement when those do happen.
We'll get there eventually. The main difference here right now is that Cougar has gone for a much faster blink. His blink is done. Now that the blink has started up for MaNa, I feel like Cougar is on a little bit of a timer to apply some pressure. I think he really should be trying to do something with Stalkers, but you can tell he's a little bit scared of those 2 Oracles that he knows are still on the map. He wants to maintain his worker count. He doesn't want to lose more workers, but really, maintaining the worker count is not enough for him right now, really. Oh, God. Gets a couple of those Stalkers caught as well. That's actually a really big deal because MaNa, A, knows that he's moving out, and B, knows that he's not going to have those 3 Stalkers, so any kind of pressure that he's able to apply with Blink, Cougar's pressure is not going to be really that scary. Stalkers are definitely a snowball unit, so losing 3 Stalkers is a pretty big deal. This delays him quite a lot. He decides to wait for the Stalkers, which is maybe not the wrong idea, but it does give Blink an opportunity to be now 2/3 done here for MaNa. There's no chance that Cougar hits before Blink is done, and Cougar, I think, has identified that as well, is instead opting to play a little bit more defensively here. But again, he's basically just saying, all right, well, we'll try to play this out from a position where I am quite far behind. He does still have that upgrade lead, and we did see that the upgrade lead that he had at +3 in the last game was a pretty big deal. So if he can find an upgrade lead in a fight, that'd be nice, but he's not that far ahead. The window's not that big.
I feel like I'm watching a nature documentary right now, Pengy. These two oracles are like crocodiles, just waiting. I've been waiting for them the whole time. They've been sitting there with their noses just barely above the water. They're gonna fly right in over the top of these.
No!
Over the top of these
That's not
stalkers.
the nature documentary I like.
Yeah, that was definitely the gazelle spearing the alligator like in the stomach with a horn or something. So much for that happening. Goodness gracious, that was terrible control from MaNa. What a blunder. I don't think he's gonna care that much though. He's got the Warp Prism, he's got the Immortals. He knows he's probably even on upgrades right now based on the timings he's seen. And even though he doesn't have charge and Couguar does, this still looks like a pretty strong engagement coming out from MaNa.
Yeah, there's not any zealots yet. He's warping in a couple of them. Great force fields once again there. We saw this in the last game as well. MaNa just takes off an Immortal for free. Couguar does not have a Warp Prism to micro those back, and MaNa is abusing that to no end. One Immortal is not really going to be a great number here. MaNa goes for the blink forward, very aggressive, takes out the second Immortal, and with this, the supply count is just insurmountably far ahead for MaNa.
Get blunked, Couguar. That was rough, man. The force field catching that first Immortal and then the blunk on the second one. Not looking good. Shield Battery Overcharge going to save him for just a little while. And finally some charge slots coming in from Couguar. I think that's a good move from Couguar. You got to have something on the map if you're desperate, and charge slots are pretty decent at zoning out some of those stalkers. The problem is now that his army's not even close together, so the stalkers are the zealots aren't creating any space for Couguar's stalkers in the background to get anything done. So even though the Warp Prism's not present with this fight for MaNa right now, it looks like the Warp Prism was in fact sniped earlier, he's still going to be in such a strong position here. I don't even know if he can end the game here necessarily, but behind this, his third base is up. Couguar's lost 15 more probes, a total of 30 probes going down this game, and here come the reinforcements from MaNa marching across the field.
Yeah, that's a pretty big army of reinforcements coming on across, and a 50 supply lead in PvP when there's no disruptors on the map is generally all she wrote. There is going to be a tiny upgrade advantage here for Couguar, but unfortunately, a little bit of a fun fact. Upgrades aren't great when there's no units to use them.
Oh my god, that's so smart, Peggy.
Down goes the Immortal once again. And, well, I don't think there's much left in this for Couguar. He's fighting, he's doing his best, but unfortunately, it's looking like MaNa is going to be keeping his tournament hopes alive and putting himself in a very good position to move on to the bracket stages with this win here. There's not really much left for Couguar.
Nope, MaNa able to split his army in twain and still win on both fronts.